Gamers, what's going on? It's Preacher. Time to pick a main, kind of. I promised this video last week to the many thousands of you watching the stream because you were waiting for it. We started so early and nicely with Legion, which is like how we're going to choose a main. This is my thought process on pretty much every single class. This is where we're at. And I could start eliminating classes very easily. And we even had, would you believe, a pen and paper list. I have it here. A pen and paper list of the classes. And we played through quite a lot of them and started to form an idea. Now, Blizzard then decided that if you watched last WoW video, you'll know Blizzard kind of changed their mind on the classes being kind of set in stone. So they've digged around with a lot of them. And I've been playing them more than ever before over the last 2 weeks. I kind of wish this was early BfA. Like, right now feels to me, as somebody who's covered several expansions, what's happening in BfA right now feels like what usually happens at the start of an alpha or a beta for a World of Warcraft expansion, where we get a whole bunch of stuff to mess around with. It's kind of where they want to go. Let's figure out some changes, see how that adapts, and then we have several months to iterate on that. And then a couple of months before the game's coming out, that's when we can start to really nail things down and they start doing class balance. Now, that's not the way BFA's worked at all. In fact, what we got was very bare bones classes, and then the Azerite armor was supposed to fix it. It took months for us to see the Azerite armor. The Azerite armor came in. It didn't really fix it. Blizzard seems to have realized that and has now gone into high gear with modifying classes. I showed again that in the last video with like so many class changes going on. There was a whole bunch more today. And also now it seems that they're trying to do it at the same time as the class balancing. So they're trying to change the classes while simultaneously trying to balance the numbers, which is hard, as you can imagine, because it's like, well, are we balancing based on this build or that build or what's going on? Like, Demonology got nerfed today. The gameplay is still decent, but they've knocked it back down. Destruction still seems like way overboard. All these kind of things. So I've been playing around with everything, trying to get an idea of what feels decent. And that means the final selection process, or really the cutting process, is going to have to wait, hopefully not too long. I wanted to start it last week, but I can't do that. But what we can do today is establish what my rules will be this time around for those guys who've watched this before, and also for anybody else looking for a main in Legion, the kind of thought process that I put into choosing a main. Let's start with the obvious. Why do I change mains? Well, I do it to look for different challenges. I like to push myself in at least some respect with a class. I want to find a class. Generally, this is how I approach it. I want to find a class. I don't want to find a spec, which is vastly different to how a lot of people tackle World of Warcraft. They pick a Fury Warrior. They pick a Survival Hunter. They pick a Demonology Warlock, right? They pick a spec. But as I raid at the high end, right? I raid at the top end of the game. I can't think that way. I can't think that way because we have to maximize our potential in order to defeat that content. That content is the hardest content they put into the game. Super difficult. And in order to defeat that content, the one ingredient you need is people playing what's best for their characters. So I have to choose a class, because if I can't say something like I want to be a survival hunter and the numbers just aren't there. Now, Legion balancing is very encouraging. They got a super good job overall with Legion balancing, but there'll always be something better. That's the nature of the beast. You're never going to balance everybody to be identical, and sometimes that means that you will be playing multiple specs throughout a raid. That can happen a lot as well. So when I tackle or try and tackle the choice of what will be my main character, I always look at, say, do I like all 3 specs, or at least 2 out of 3 specs, and the third one is tolerable, is a word I would use. Like, am I okay with it? So that's why we landed on the Mage. I enjoyed Fire, I enjoyed Frost, and I absolutely did not mind Arcane. So if it suddenly became like it did do in Legion, which was like, okay, we're going to start as Fire. Cool, I like Fire. But then it just suddenly switched to Frost. Like, midway through Nighthold, it's like, everyone's playing Frost now. Frost is better. Okay, that's fine as well. I like Frost as well. Then it goes backwards and forwards. We never really saw Arcane see the light of day. Potentially it could have, but it never quite materialized. There was a lot of hype. I think it was around Tomb of Sargeras. Might have even been Nighthold, that maybe Arcane was going to get its day in the sun. But it never quite materialized, which is unfortunate. But that's how I approach it. I'm looking for a class. So when I choose a main, sure, I might be choosing a druid because I want to favor balance, for example. I want to be a Moonkin most of the time. But perhaps Moonkins are dog shit at some point, right? Maybe I need to switch over to Feral. Okay, maybe we need an extra healer. A Resto Druid's good. Do I enjoy playing a Resto Druid? Do I enjoy tanking on a Guardian Druid, right? All these things. Accompanied with that is I have to be very careful because of my personal mental approach to WoW, and many of you do not have this. It's always, every time we do this video series, is the biggest point of contention for people who are like, just don't think that way, right? That's the attitude, and I agree. I wish with all my heart I couldn't think this way. But if I choose a class that has multiple hybrid roles, so a Druid would be a great example. The tank, healer, range DPS, melee DPS. It's in me to make sure every single one of those spec possibilities is as good as it can be. Should I be called upon to take up the mantle of that? Right? So that is how I approach it. That is how I've always approached it, and it has never failed me. It has always come in handy at some point. Even right now, I recently, as of like the last 3 months, had to choose an alt for my guild to raid with. I chose the DK. I kept blood and DPS, even unholy, that I've not even played in a raid yet, to the best they could possibly be. Got to get them 75 traits. Got to get their relics up to snuff. Got to do all those things in order to, maybe I need to do them. And I do. I tank Argus. I do Gripper Duty, which is not really tanking. I DPS some bosses, and I'm swapping around and doing those kinds of things. So that's how I approach it. Now, how you approach it could be totally different. If you are in a position, say, where your spec maximization is nowhere near as important, and time to offend some people, but that would be generally normal in heroic raiding. You don't really need to be the absolute bleeding edge, although your raid leaders may demand it of you because of what the mythic raiders are doing as best as they can do. Then you can afford to maybe say, I want to be a Fury, I want to be an Arms Warrior. And the further down the level of difficulty you go, the more flexible you are, right? The more flexible you are, you can play whatever the hell you want, all the way to the point where you're pugging your content and it doesn't matter. Most people aren't going to care. Whatever you bring to Mythic Plus or whatever, you might get the odd guy kick you out or whatever. That can happen, not denying it. But for the most part, the lesser difficulty you go down, the more flexibility you have. Now, for me, this time around, BfA is going to be a little different. Should I choose to play it? I will remind this, I'm not sold on BfA right now. The recent changes have been encouraging because I was very unhappy with what they had in store for us at Endgame, which was seemingly not a lot, but a big grind. That's all they, and in terms of the AP grind, that's all that seemed to be waiting for any of us once we hit 120 was a massive AP grind, which I was not excited about, with poor quality emissary quests and world questing, which seems to be the game right now, and island expeditions, which I know I'll be bored of at some point. Hopefully not too quickly, but with the recent crushing of that system, I'm kind of okay. If I'm lucky that I'm fortunate enough to play many other games, and for work, which is what it is. And I don't see WoW as just my recreational activity. I do a lot of stuff for work with it, and that's a very fortunate position to be in that not many of you guys are in. So if it comes down to BfA doesn't have much outdoor world content that I enjoy other than raiding, which is my main enjoyment, that's okay with me. Like, personally, that sits well with me. I can keep my alts up to snuff. I can play around with them for work without being too far behind, right? Which is a big deal for me. If I want to cover and look at various classes, if there are massive grinds attached to each of them, that becomes a big problem because it's an enormous time sink of repetitive content. Okay, hopefully that is making sense to you guys. The less of that exists, fine. Right, fine. That's okay with me. I can move on to other things, but not all of you are in that position, and that choice will lie with you, whatever your personal taste. Because WoW is obviously a game that appeals to vast arrays of people. So whatever your personal enjoyment might be fine in BfA. Whatever, that's down to you. So this time around, my guild operates very differently now. I changed guilds for the first time in like 4 years, at the tail end of Legion. My old guild stopped raiding. I found a new guild. I raid with the Fat Boss guys right now. And the way they run things is very differently. So in this guild, it's a very small roster. Extremely small. But the idea is, in order to play at top end and to play the way we want to, which is to kill the end content reasonably quickly, is that people should have alts ready and raring to go. That's the system. So instead of having a lot of players It's kind of a middle ground between being mega hardcore and just what you guys would describe as normal hardcore. Is the ability that, yes, we're going to be hitting bosses very early. They might require really obscene setups sometimes. So how do we do that? Do we have a lot of players and we can mix and match and do things like that? No, let's have a smaller roster, but let's plan who's playing what. Let's say we got all bases covered. Should we need to suddenly field a lot of ranged DPS, a lot of melee DPS, more specifically, should we need to field a lot of rogues, a lot of druids, whatever it might be that feels suitable to make this encounter as easy as possible so we can get past it and move on to the next thing. So I need to choose 3. That's my position. I need to choose 3 classes this time that I feel comfortable playing and meet all my criteria, which is way more difficult than the last expansion where I just had to pick 1 and then I could kind of goof around and whatever the hell I wanted. I need to pick 3 now. So, how am I going to do that? Well, obviously, there are going to be hybrid specs involved. In Legion, I didn't want anything to do with tanking or healing, which instantly eliminated a lot of the classes, so that again, I didn't have to feel the requirement to gear those up. So it left me with just pure DPS classes. This time around, though, I'm far more flexible to having the choice. I did say I never wanted to play a main character anymore that couldn't tank. And that's because I get infuriated waiting around for tanks or having to rely on other players. I want to get my content done as quickly as possible. I want to get into there. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to be looking over the next week or so for 3 classes. We are going to tackle this now. As I said, I've seen some balancing numbers this time around. They did a patch yesterday where they were starting to balance things. So let's look at this first. Let's have a quick scan of where my thoughts are with each of the classes. I think that would be a really good idea. We'll do that now. So the Death Knight. The Death Knight Unholy. I've been playing Unholy, as you can see, he's actually spec'd Unholy now. I've been playing Unholy today. Actually did not mind it at all. Now, originally I did write off the DK. It was the first time I ever got rank 1s in the game, and therefore I felt my challenge with this was done. But that was Cataclysm. It was so long ago. I'm actually willing to go back to this. Unholy feels really nice. Frost, I'm not a big fan of in its new iteration, but they've announced yet more changes. So if you're not up to date, Frost has changed twice in the last 6 days. And the current build is really buggy, like super buggy. So it's hard to tell how it's supposed to play because a lot of the spells just don't work, which is really annoying. Like a lot of the things it's supposed to be doing just aren't happening. And makes the spec feel really odd. Blood, I'm not a big fan of the BfA Blood DK. As you probably are aware if you watch the tank ranking, I'm a massive fan of the Demon Hunter. But I have a sneaking suspicion the Demon Hunter is about to get smashed. I hope it doesn't, but I think Blizzard's going to come down hard on the Demon Hunter soon. So Demon Hunter is definitely in there. Frost, I'm not a huge fan of. Unholy, I'm really enjoying. It's got some unintuitive talent choices, which is kind of a theme throughout BfA. A lot of the talent choices aren't really clear which one should be superior and need math to really figure them out. I think that's a terrible talent system, and I hope they, in many ways, just simplify it down, because a lot of them you're reading is like, well, it kind of does the same thing, like on paper, on the, you know, the written word says it kind of does the same sort of thing. So which one's better? And it's not intuitive or clear which one should be better, which is a bit wonky. The Demon Hunter, as you probably know, I'm a huge fan of. The Havoc Demon Hunter is nice and smooth and got a good pace to it. Some people think it's a little clunkier than Legion. Most classes are. I'm not going to lie. Most classes are pretty clunky compared to Legion. The loss of the legendaries and stuff, we've talked about it to death. So that's an overall thing. So saying this is clunkier than Legion, that's clunkier than Legion, is a waste of our time. That's applied to everybody. And of course, I'm a massive fan of Vengeance Demon Hunter, so those two are in. Druid is probably out. The only spec I really enjoy in the current, as of today, version of BfA is Feral. Feral I've been having a little bit of fun with. It's got its problems, as everything else does. I'm not going to mention that again. Can we just take it as read for the remainder of the video? Every spec in BfA has its problems. Let's just take it as read. Something has problems somewhere. So the Druid's going to be out. Resto, I don't mind. Guardian just bores me to death. The new balance is better than what it was, but it still bores me to death. Compared to I play my Legion Druid, which is like 978 now. And I'm just like, it's not even in the same fucking ballpark, man. It doesn't even feel like the same class. It really drives me crazy. The Hunter. I'm torn on the Hunter. I don't mind Marksman. I know some people have a problem with it, but that's not my business. I quite enjoy Marksman. BM I cannot stand. Still, it just feels like it shouldn't be possible. And yes, I've memed on it, but jokes aside, that spec is just not interesting. And that's a sucker. The new Survival is okay. It is. It's okay. But it's, for me to enjoy it, it needs a little bit more than the spender filler. And that's kind of how Survival falls in. And a lot of people are really happy with that, and that's great. For me, though, the interest comes from the Dragon's Fire Grenade talent. And without that, I can't really enjoy the specs. So Hunter's probably out at this point. Mage, I'm probably going to carry my Mage over. I'm quite fine with all three specs. Each of them is worse than Legion. But again, that's applying to everybody. And Frost in particular, which is a spec I've always enjoyed but had a love-hate relationship, is less RNG than Legion, and that was my biggest issue with Frost. It became a bit of a meme amongst many of people in the community. I did enjoy people sending me screenshots. If you don't know, there was a weak aura for the Frost Mage that tracked how many Frost bolts you'd casted without anything proccing, and I loved you guys tweeting me pictures of the records you'd hit and things like that. That was really fun. The Monk is definitely a possibility. Despite being a hybrid and having all three specs, I really enjoy all three. The new Brewmaster, the new Brewmaster changes, spicing it up, which is, I know, the problem with the Monk Discord. Got in contact with me to mention that the rotation was too static and it could be done by a mouse wheel macro. They've addressed that and spiced that up. Good. Windwalker's super fun, and so's Mistweaver. Enjoy all three of those, so definitely a possibility there. The Paladin is going to be out. I've been trying Ret a lot more recently. I know you haven't seen any Ret footage from me, but you will soon. I have been playing, as you can see, I've been playing around with Ret quite a bit over the last few days, and it just doesn't do it for me. It's better, but it doesn't do it for me. Prot doesn't do it for me, and Holy certainly doesn't do it for me. Like, I've tried the Holy Paladin, and in fact, the Legion was the most enjoyable version of the Holy Paladin. It's kind of the same, but it's just lost some spark for me. Whether it's out of just lack of interest or got used to it and it's not as impressive anymore, it could be any of those things. But what can I say? My feelings are my feelings. I've just lost interest in it. I'll play some more of it to put out some more analytical point of view over the next few weeks. The Priest. I've been playing Priest today. Like, I think we did 4 dungeon runs on the Priest. Shout outs to Shade, who tanked all those dungeons for me. I was like, I just want to try something else. I've desperately tried to enjoy it, and I can't. I can't. It just... At this point, Shadow would be my primary go-to. I enjoy Dis, and I enjoy Holy. I think they're okay. They're in decent places. Compared to everything else, I think they're in a decent place. But Shadow, it almost feels like the way they've got it set up now, like, they've tried to fix the problems of Shadow just being, like, garbage outside of Void Form, and they've done several things to try and do that. And the way they've done that is tried to front-load a lot of damage into burst and stuff, but no matter how much I play this now, it almost feels like Void Form, which is such a cool mechanic, feels like a pain in the ass to Blizzard, and they're trying to work around it. It now just feels that way, and it just never seems to get where it needs to be. Maybe in high-end gear, this is really going to start to do some incredible things. I think it's got potential to do that. But the gutting of what I consider to be absolutely core spells, Shadow of Death being namely one of them, those abilities just being baked into talents, even Void Torrent, those abilities just feel so fundamental to the class, and making up for it with the new instant Void Form mechanic and all this kind of stuff, just trying to... They feel like they're trying to mask the problems that are still there. And if you fight anything for longer than, say, a minute, right, the problems just become so apparent, and you're like, oh my god. Ugh. Rogue. Overall, not bad. Not bad. Like, playstyle-wise, a little weird. I don't know why they're keeping Poison Bomb if they put Crimson Tempest in there. They don't even seem to be in the same ballpark. Maybe the damage numbers will change that, but I imagine a lot of Rogues. I didn't play a lot of Rogue at all. I would go as far as to say that in Legion, the Rogue was my least played character. Felt really bad for him because I enjoyed it so much in Warlords of Draenor and mained a Rogue in Warlords of Draenor. But in Legion... like, barely touched the damn thing. Felt really bad about it. Got him back into it. It was like, I could see why. It just doesn't take off for me. There's not much fun there. But it's all right. If you enjoy the Rogue in Legion, you're probably going to be fine in BfA as well. But it's out because it just doesn't excite me to play it. I don't know why. I need to put my finger on why. I played it today. I played some Assassination today. I played some Sub today. I didn't play any Outlaw. But it's just not there, you know. And you need that spark. You need that spark if you're going to enjoy it. The Shaman. Elemental is one of the funnest specs in BfA. By miles. It's so fun. It's so cool. Enhancement, not so much. Not really feeling that. And Elemental's got its problems, but it's still really fun. It's a very fun spec. It's got these wonderful little moments of glory. Resto Shaman, though, even though it's one of the most fun healers for me to play in Legion, feels really lackluster in BfA. And they haven't even changed that much. It just feels really lackluster. So I'm going to write the Shaman off because I only really enjoy 1 out of 3 specs. The Warlock, though, fuck me, they've done some good things for this. Even though Demonology was nerfed today, it's still fun to play. Say what you want, it is still fun to play. It has some scope to benefit good play, maybe. I've had Warlocks breathing down my neck recently as soon as I log in on BfA Beta, because I imagine some of them have got them saved because it's like Preacher's Lock, right? They always name saved, but and some people from my guild are like, it's really good. It is. I like Affliction. I like where it's at. I like the new interesting mechanics. I like Demonology, and I've got to be honest, really enjoying Destruction right now. It's got such a good pace to it. It feels brutal. It feels far more brutal than a Mage. Really is on top form, and graphically I think they've done such a good job. So Warlock is definitely in the running. Warrior, I'm still torn on. Like, as you can see, I've been playing Fury. This is all from just dungeon running, these 4 levels I've got on the Warrior. I don't think I've done anything open world, but I did, like, essentially get a capped Warrior on the BfA Alpha before the character wipe. I did have a capped Warrior. I did do all the leveling on a Warrior. The new Fury is pretty great. I'm sure from that last video you saw that. Prot, though, is it's pretty boring. And arms I just can't get into, and that's what this comes down to. I'm choosing my characters. Does that matter for you? Maybe not. Maybe you love the new arms. I've tried the revamped arms. I just don't feel it as much as I want to. I still think it's for me in the fantasy world, it's still very locked to this two-hander. Got this big two-handing not clunk, so we shouldn't use that word. Massive hits is what arms is all about, and that might be right, and that's what people are probably going to love for it. But for me, compared to what's out there, I mean, for me, it's just not there. It's really not there. It doesn't have the pace, the savagery, the brutality that Fury brings with it. It doesn't have the interesting things that Unholy brings with it, with the disease spreading and blights and all those kind of things. And Ret, it's kind of in the same boat, but even then you're popping wings, you've got storms flying everywhere, you've got all these cool things, and arms just isn't quite there for me. So I'm going to write the Warrior off, despite me really... It's kind of the same as the Shaman. Ellie, I love. Fury, I love. The other 2 specs are what's ruining it for me. Which is a real shame, because if Fury turns out to be Garbo in numbers and arms is the way to go, that's when I'll be like, ugh, god damn, man, god damn. So those are pretty much my write-offs of now, but I'm going to caveat it. I'm going to put a pin in it right here. With what Blizzard is doing, that could change in a note that appears, right? It could change because they're messing around with everything. So I'm just going to put a pin in that right there and say, right now, that's where I'm at. We'll be looking at this over the next few days, and I'll keep you updated. So this is the first one. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gents. Good luck with your choices. Can you make a choice? I'd love to see your feedback. Like, are you just like, well, I always play a Mage, so whatever they do with it, that's what I do with it? Or do you use the new expansion to be like, okay, what choices have I got here? I would like some interest on it. Thank you so much. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.